Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is the founder of Better Beings. She is also the author of The You Revolution, and she is a health and happiness strategist. Today's guest is Michelle Zellner. Michelle, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Thank you, Quentin. It's lovely to be here.
For sure. So, Michelle, we're just going to jump right into what I like to call the conversational warm-up. I've got 4 questions that I like to ask all my guests. The first question that I have for you is, how do you start your day? Do you have a specific morning routine or morning ritual you like to stick to on most mornings?
Yeah, I'm usually up somewhere between 4:30 and 5:15, and just try to get going as soon as possible. Typically, we'll get the teeth brushed and then start downing some water. So, I don't know, about 40 ounces of water to get going, and then get out the door before I can think too much to get to the gym and get in a good workout.
Okay, cool. Now, is there anything in terms of like a mindfulness or meditation practice or mantras, anything like that inserted in your morning routine or not?
Not really in my morning routine. Those are some things that will maybe come to me throughout the day, or if I'm going through different situations or experiences. But I feel like I have a pretty mindful life in general, so it's not something I have dedicated to. Not that I probably wouldn't benefit from doing that, but as of right now, it's not.
And that's cool, and that's why I love, Michelle, having all these conversations with different people, because there's a lot of similarities, especially when it comes to the morning routine. But just because 100 people do it this way doesn't mean you or I have to do it that way. You know what I mean? And that's why I love having all these conversations with people, because we're all uniquely different, but we're all uniquely similar. So that's cool. Now I want to touch on kind of getting that movement in. That's something that almost all of my guests, all 100 and however many I've had on now, they usually start with some sort of movement, whether that's yoga, whether that's going straight to the gym to do a class or to work out. Why is having that movement for you personally, Michelle, an important part of that morning routine or that morning process?
Exercise has basically been part of my entire life. I was a gymnast growing up, and so it's just built into me. It feels very foreign to not work out, so I sometimes find myself needing to not go to the gym, but I don't really know what to do if I don't. So I do think just the regular habit is it's part of the routine. So even if I don't need to work out, I will still go and move my body. So maybe it's an active recovery day with stretching and foam rolling and things that. But I just find that it's just the best way to start my day. I believe that movement is medicine for a lot of things, and I always have a better day when I work out first. There are certainly times when, because of my work schedule, I'm not going to get a workout in if I have to be somewhere at 6:30 a.m. and then the rest of my day is full as well. But I try to build those in as those kind of forced rest days.
For sure. Cool. All right. So the second question that I have for you, Michelle, favorite book or book that you like to gift often?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I'm not a huge reader, although I do read, but it's usually mindless reading because one of my things, I don't like to sit, and I equate reading with sitting down. So I read before I go to bed, or if I'm on an airplane, or if I'm laying on a beach or by the pool. But generally, then that's going to be just some kind of brain candy that's not real in depth. But that being said, sort of industry and wellness related, The Culprit and the Cure by Stephen Aldana is one of my go-tos as far as just here's the basics. This is why our state of health is the way it is, and this is how you fix it. And I also like Tiffany Darfou's Drop the Ball. Somebody asked me about that, and I didn't really know about it, so I picked it up and read it. And I think a lot of people would really benefit from adopting the practice of dropping the ball. And basically that just means letting go, being okay saying no, doing that kind of stuff.
Cool. Now, I want to touch on the book that you've written called The You Revolution. I'd love to kind of have you talk about maybe just the process of writing that book, producing that book, and then I want you to talk about, if you don't mind, what the You Revolution is.
Yeah, so the You Revolution is actually a 10-week lifestyle self-improvement class that I created and have been teaching for, I think, just wrapped up round 6. So years ago, one of my corporate contacts approached me to create something like this for their client, which is the Denver public school system for their employees. So I just thought about, what does a robust lifestyle improvement class look like? And I thought about all the things that I had to do to improve in my life to be a healthy human. So basically it's 10 weeks touching on everything from goal setting to mindset to knowing your numbers, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management. I mean, it really covers everything that a human needs in order to not only live, but to actually thrive.
Right.
And at the end of, I think, the 2017 class, one of the participants said, you really should write this in a book. And I thought, well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And so so I did. And so the whole title is The You Revolution, The Journey of a Better Being. So it's my class content, but it's my own personal wellness journey threaded all throughout it as well.
Cool. And where can people find the You Revolution book?
It's on Amazon if you just type in my name.
That's okay.
And it's also on Audible. I just narrated the audiobook, and that just released back in January. So, or if you go to my website, there's direct links to it as well.
How was did you so you read like your own book, obviously for Audible. What was that process like? Was that fun, or was it kind of weird? What was it like?
It was incredibly weird, actually. I've been teaching and telling my story for many years, and have done a number of radio and podcast interviews, which totally different from actually reading your story. It was. I'm glad I did it. It felt. It didn't seem like it would be right for someone else to read my story.
Of course, yeah.
And so I thought, well, here we go. We're just going to put it out there. It is one thing to write it and have your words out there, but it's a different thing to have your voice out there, as you know.
Right, yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, and it's always weird. No matter how many times you kind of like hear your voice, whether it's through a podcast, radio, or social media platforms, like it's like, is that really how my voice sounds? So I'm sure it is kind of a weird process, but that's really cool that you had the opportunity to write the book, but then also it's out there in audio form. So that's awesome, and we're going to get more into kind of like the You Revolution and just kind of like that holistic approach. I just want to finish up a couple more questions here, and then we'll come back to that a little bit later. The next question, Michelle, favorite quote, mantra, or word? Now, I've been recently kind of prefacing this with saying this could be a favorite quote, mantra, or word during this season of life. We're kind of like still fresh in 2020. A lot of people on social media are like, this is my word, or this is my mantra for 2020, which that's cool. Or however, again, you want to take it. It could be a favorite quote, mantra, or word, maybe from a past season, but favorite quote, mantra, or word?
I've definitely had a number of them along the way. At one point, it was keep your heels, head, and standards high. That one served me well for a number of years, and that still rings in my head.
Yeah.
But another one I've been saying to myself lately, but also when I coach and teach classes, is pick your hard. It's hard now or harder later. So I would say pick your hard.
Okay,
and
cool.
That's certainly something I have to tell myself, and have learned along the way too, that it's almost always the case. Hard now or harder later. You get to decide.
Cool. Yeah, there's a quote out there that says pay now or pay later, which is in the exact same kind of frame of mind as pick your hard, because that is you're 100% right, and especially with health and fitness, like it's either you're gonna take care of your health and your fitness now, and you're gonna pay and invest now, or you're gonna be paying later, and it's probably gonna cost you a lot more later, not just financially, but in all aspects, and your quality of life is gonna suck probably. You know, so
absolutely
take care of business now, or you're gonna be paying later, and gonna have to be taking some hard roads in the future. So last question, favorite or most listened to podcast? And maybe if you don't listen to podcasts a lot, maybe there's somebody on social media, maybe there's somebody on YouTube that you appreciate, but favorite or most listened to podcast, or maybe favorite influencer, somebody that has a message that you really appreciate.
Yeah, so it would definitely be the podcast because, as you probably recognize, I'm not huge on social media.
Right, yeah.
I'm a bit of a dinosaur in that way, but it's hard to pick a favorite podcast. I definitely like ones that tell stories, so I certainly enjoy yours very much.
Thank you.
Another local one, which is how I first found out about yours, is Natalie Dellinger's the Not Another Wellness podcast.
She's awesome. She's a
Love
sweetheart.
her. Some for just really valuable information that I can then direct clients to. There's a Dr. Anne-Marie Barter. She has the Fearless Health podcast. Incredibly fascinating information on just the body functions and things like that. So yeah, I like ones that tell stories, but also that give me useful information that I can then pass on to my clients.
Love that. Yeah, awesome. I know for me with podcasting, like sometimes I'm into the health and fitness ones, and I'm in like the entrepreneur ones. It's like I'm all over the place. But that's the cool thing about podcasting is like whatever you're interested in, like you can find probably about 1,000 podcasts, that are gonna touch on that stuff.
Yeah.
Especially health and wellness.
Well, and it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole. So
for sure.
I have decided for myself that I'm only going to listen to people who are local and or people that I really support their message.
Cool. Yeah.
And want to steer other people to listening to their podcast because
I
we have an
appreciate
incredible wealth of
course
stuff here in Colorado.
Yeah. And I've got some guests that I've had on the podcast that have their own podcast, so maybe I can share those with you so that you can maybe check those out too, because that's a big thing. Even just like like business, right? Like I'm from a small town. My parents were entrepreneurs. They had brick and mortar businesses. So I grew up in a home where my parents were always preaching. They were always talking about how people need to support local businesses, and we see that now with the growth of the bigger cities, and us millennials are kind of like living in the bigger cities or around big cities and suburbs and things like that. The rural America, small town America, it's really dying, right? Because people don't understand, especially people my age, millennials and Gen X and things like that. Like we don't understand the importance of supporting local entrepreneurs, local businesses, giving back to the community, serving the community. And so that's great that you kind of have that mindset and the heart to support, listen to local like podcasters, because there's a lot of them, and Denver's, Boulder, this whole state of Colorado, it's just such a powerful place for podcasting, but specifically people that have an interest in fitness and health and wellness and are podcasting in that realm. So that's cool, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Michelle,
and actually, being said, there's one other that I definitely need to support and give a shout out to is my good friend Tarverly, who has one called Grit and Grace.
Cool.
And it's the entrepreneurial journey, specifically for females.
Yeah.
But she also has sort of a wellness angle to it. So
Okay,
it's a nice
cool.
little marriage of entrepreneurial spirit as well as self-care and making sure you're staying healthy.
Is she here local?
She is, yeah.
Denver?
In fact,
okay.
there was a time where the two of us were going to do a podcast together.
Oh, yeah,
and I quickly knew that it was not my thing, but
funny.
I absolutely believed it was her calling,
Yeah,
and
cool.
it definitely is.
Yeah, I'd love to get connected with her, so we might have to chit-chat after the podcast
Absolutely.
here. So, all right, so Michelle, we're going to just kind of transition a little bit into your story, your backstory. First of all, I'd like to just kind of find out, if you don't mind sharing with myself and the listeners, where did you grow up? Kind of what were those younger years like? Were you involved in sports, which you already mentioned gymnastics, so sports obviously was something that was a huge part of your upbringing, but maybe there were some other sports, maybe there were some clubs, extracurricular activities. Just share a little bit about your home environment, those younger years, the childhood, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin.
Okay.
I think we had about 106 kids in my class, and one older sister. She's 2 years older than I am. Really delightful childhood, as far as I can recall.
Yeah.
My parents were both transplants to Wisconsin. My mom is actually Dutch, So my dad met her when he was stationed in Holland
cool.
In the Air Force.
Okay.
And he grew up in upstate New York, basically on a chicken farm, and decided that wasn't the life he wanted. So he joined the Air Force and eventually found their way to Wisconsin because of father's job, and grew up in a delightful little small town. I got into gymnastics relatively early, probably about third grade, and that was it. That was basically my childhood. So there was a group of us, my sister and then 2 other family friends, who all joined together, and I was the one that decided this was for me.
Cool.
So yeah.
So what was obviously when you're in the third grade, it's you're super young, but as you maybe got older and progressed in gymnastics, what was kind of like that hook that kind of like kept you in it, or what was kind of like the interest for you in terms of staying in gymnastics and continuing to pursue it?
I loved challenging myself and learning new skills and the sense of accomplishment of mastering a skill. Maybe a really good question and more interesting answer is, what did I not like about it? Which I didn't understand this until way later, because I was sort of a moody, pessimistic girl in the gym. And I realized that later, upon reflection, that all sort of started to creep in right around competition season. And, again, much later, I realized I'm not a competitive person. That's not a value of mine. And so while I loved gymnastics for gymnastics' sake, when you're in a sport, you do it to compete. I mean, that's just what we do.
Of course.
Right? But I didn't like being up on a stage. I didn't like being judged. I didn't want to let people down. So the pressure I put on myself to do good, to make my coaches proud, to make my parents proud, usually led to me not doing well. And yet I didn't really care for me that I didn't do well. I cared that I'm going to disappoint my parents, my coaches. So that was kind of a big push-pull in my life, because there were various times that I tried to quit and I was talked out of it. And when I ultimately did decide to officially be done, I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. I literally just left a note on my coach's car and went home.
So I'm assuming because you quit gymnastics in that manner, and you talk about you not really caring about if you performed bad in an event or something, but you cared more about like maybe what your parents or coaches and maybe some peers thought. Was there fear then within you in the terms of like letting people down and like I'm going to write a note to this coach and tell them that I'm quitting because I don't want I don't really want to face them face to face? Was there some like fear in all that then?
Yeah, I'm sure there was. I don't know that at the time I recognized it in that way, right? I mean, looking back, it's certainly the cowardly way to do it. But I also knew that if I had talked about it, they were going to try to talk me out of it again.
I see.
So part of it was that I actually knew in my soul this was time. And I didn't want anyone else to try to change my mind like they had before. And I'm glad that they did change my mind before, because I wasn't really ready to be done at that time. I was just not in the mood to continue at the moment and make that impulsive decision to quit. But this time I was, and there was no doubt in my mind that I was. And so I don't know if it was being a coward or fear as much as I knew this was right and I didn't want to risk anyone else talking me out of it. And then because I don't want to let somebody down, me deciding to continue, right, to make them happy instead of doing what I knew I wanted to do.
So how old were you, or what grade, what age frame were you in when you actually quit gymnastics?
Yeah, it was October 18th, 1989.
Okay,
I remember it like it was yesterday. It was senior year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then once you wrote the note and things like that, I mean, did your coach like approach you and try to get you not to quit again, or what did that look like?
No, there was silence. Yeah. So this is all part of my journey that I do talk about in my book, but honestly, I didn't go right home. Actually, what I did was I went to every Dairy Queen in town first and got like the biggest ice cream blizzard you could get and
awesome.
ate them, 3 of them on the way home. Yeah, it was awesome, and then it wasn't, right?
Yeah, right, of course.
I mean, it was like the big old middle finger to the world, and I was free, I could do whatever I wanted, and then it was, as you can imagine, not great.
Yeah. Your stomach probably didn't feel good
right,
later.
Yeah. And when I got home, my mom was like, what are you doing home? I'm like, well, I don't have practice. And she's like, oh, did it get called off? I said, no, I don't have practice. And she was like, what?
Yeah.
And then it was about a month later, our team always did like an exhibition fundraiser thing, and I showed up to watch, and it still brings me to tears. Saw my coaches for the first time, and it was very emotional.
Yeah.
Still.
Especially when you put so much effort into something, right?
Yeah.
And then like it's done.
Yeah.
And then I want you to share in terms of this, but like, your coach didn't like come after you or whatever, or you it doesn't sound like people really approached you once you wrote that letter to your coach to quit. To have you come back out. So like when you put everything into something, and then was there a realization of like, oh, well, like kind of like, what is my worth now? Like I'm not like getting this positive reinforcement because I'm a gymnast. Like, because like for me, like I played football up until my freshman year in college, then I quit. And then like that was some of like the hardest times of my life, the darkest times of my life, because like that was my identity. Was a football player, was an athlete. And people, life goes on. Like either you're a part of the team or you're not. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you kind of take it in life, honestly, that's how life is. Like we think that all these people are interested in us, care about us, or we're a part of this, but then we leave. And honestly, like 99.9% of the world is just we're all doing our thing. And if you're not with somebody, or if you're not in like a group, like it's kind of like they're just going to continue on, right? So did you sense that? Did you feel that like when you showed up and everybody's kind of continuing to do their thing? Were you just like like this sucks? Like I'm I don't really have my identity right now, or what was your thought process at that time?
No, actually, I think that's the difference between ending it on your terms and having something end, because it ends.
Right.
And because I ended it on my terms, it was wonderful.
Okay.
My coach embraced me with a big hug and
lots
of tears.
Right.
But also, she knew that this, you don't want to be in something that you don't want to be in. And I was ready to be done. I had injured myself earlier in that year, and there were a lot of dynamics within the gym that, for various reasons, were maybe not really great to be around.
Yep.
And I definitely lost the passion to even be there. And I knew I needed to end it before competition started, because we're already headed into the time of year that I didn't like.
Yeah.
So I think just knowing that I was really ready to be done, I didn't have any regrets or any feelings like I'm missing out on anything.
Yep.
I did it, and it was wonderful for a lot of reasons, and learned a lot, and lessons from that experience certainly carried me through life and continue to do so. And I think that was also a big, just in itself, pivotal life lesson that you need to be done before you really can move on. And that could mean a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. But I think sometimes we try to move on when we're not really done. And certainly that's another pivotal lesson later on in my life that that I had to learn again. Right.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that out, Michelle, because I was going to bring that up. Like that's a huge lesson at a pretty young age that you learned. So that's cool. All right. So let's transition then into like post high school. Where did you go to college? What did those years look like?
Yeah, so I always knew that I was not going to do gymnastics in college. It's not ever something I wanted to do, which was another reason that let me just end it now so I can have like 1 year of real life as a senior in high school. Ever since third grade, third grade seems to be a pretty big year in my life.
Yeah.
That was when my parents took us on our first trip to Hawaii. And it literally felt like I was home. So I knew always that that's where I would end up someday, and college seemed like a really good opportunity. I did 2 years at home at University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh first. That was kind of the deal with my parents. And then I finally got to go to school at UH. And I went thinking I was going to go into the tourism industry because that's their big industry there. And after a semester of that, I hated it and then decided, I don't know, what do you do? Well, I guess I'll be a psychology major. I don't know. What else do you do? So went to UH, got my undergraduate degree in psychology, and loved every minute of my life in Hawaii. And then reality set in that it's far, it's expensive, what do you do here? Yeah. And so ended up going to grad school at CU Boulder for kinesiology.
Okay. Cool.
And yeah, really intended on being a sports psychologist, was sort of misled in my graduate program, thinking that I was going to get to work with athletes, and that was not the case at all. It was all research-based, which was kind of a bummer.
Sucks.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
But then at that time, obviously moving to Boulder, I worked at a gym, and that's actually just at the front desk, and that's when I fell into personal training. So that's really where like my actual career sort of got rooted and settled in there. Okay.
So, obviously fitness was a part of your life just in terms of sport and things like that. After you quit gymnastics and then when you went to college, did you kind of continue to work out or not?
Yeah, exercise never left my life, which I'm very thankful for because while gymnastics was wonderful for a lot of things, it really did leave me with a pretty jacked up relationship with food. And so I spent a good number of years just eating whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, because I could, which, as you can imagine, led to some outcomes that I was not super excited about. Yeah. And had I not continued to exercise, I know it would have been even worse. So fitness and exercise was always definitely just ingrained in me because of part of it. Maybe that is how I kept that identity going. I don't know, but I also knew that it was necessary to hopefully combat some of the damage I was doing to myself with my food choices. Yeah.
So what it like, when you're in college and stuff, was it just kind of like go to the gym, do the elliptical? Like what kind of was your fitness at that stage or season of your life?
Yeah, so you got to remember, this is back in the early 90s. I'm pretty sure the elliptical didn't even exist then.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I lived in Hawaii, so we did a lot of outdoor activities. I walked, I ran, I did the Honolulu Marathon a couple times. I did a little, they called it the Tin Man Triathlon. I did work out with weights. I think it was a YMCA that I went to, and did strength training. So it was just kind of well-rounded, but lots of movement, lots of walking. I was always an early riser before anybody else. I would go out for 10-mile walks because it's beautiful, and what else am I going to do at 5 in the morning when everyone else is still sleeping?
For sure, yeah. Now, I would like, if you wouldn't mind, just touching on kind of like some of those eating habits that you got into post gymnastics. Like you said, you went to Dairy Queen as soon as you quit and just plowed down the Dairy Queen. But because that's even for me personally, eating has been something that it's been a struggle for me at different times in my life, just because like I know that through eating I can manipulate the way I look and things like that, and that's always been just like a psychological thing for me, and a little bit of a struggle and a battle. And I know, like, with a lot of the females I brought into my podcast, at some point, obviously not all of them, but a lot of them, at some point, eating was, some sort of a control mechanism for them. And I've had, several females on the podcast that have had eating disorders and really, even been hospitalized and things like that. But, kind of like, what was your relationship with food? You already mentioned it wasn't really good, but I just would like you to kind of go in depth a little bit more, Michelle, in terms of like your relationship with the food. What did it kind of look like? Like, did you just go out and binge eat? Did you kind of develop an eating disorder? What did that look like, just for the sake of the listeners and maybe some people out there that are struggling with that right now? Yeah,
I mean, I definitely grew up with healthy food being served to me, or what we thought at the time was healthy food, right? But also, well, you're a kid, you burn it all off, so it didn't really matter. It wasn't about nutrition. It was just, this is just what we eat. Yeah. And then as you grow, of course, you start gaining weight and things happen. So,
Yeah.
and that doesn't really lend itself to being successful if you're going to try to flip your body in the air, right? So there's certainly requirements for a gymnast
Yeah.
that weren't really aligned with what all my other friends got to do, was eat whatever they wanted at the parties, go to the pizza party, go to this. So part of me, I internalized it as, it's not fair. They can eat whatever they want, and I can't, even though I loved gymnastics, right? So it was, it was just my own internalization of all of it, that it wasn't fair. And then, people in my life saying, oh, you need to eat, and others saying, why are you eating? I mean, there's lots and lots of mixed messages all over the place. And then, so there's a reason why I did what I did when I first quit. It's because I had like this freedom to do whatever I wanted, right? I wasn't going to get on the scale for anybody. I didn't have to flip my body in the air. I didn't have to get in a leotard and have somebody, poke my belly because it's sticking out too far, whatever, right? So it was definitely rebellion, and I love sweets, so it's really hard to not eat something that you love. And I think, clearly because there was deprivation going on when I was a gymnast, now I didn't have to deprive myself, so I deserved all of this, right? I sacrificed for so long, and I deserve it. That was my mentality, even though I knew while I was eating it, like, this isn't going to lead anywhere good. So, did it turn into binging? Episodic binging, but it wasn't like, and I wouldn't say it was an eating disorder type of binge, but clearly it was a shit ton of food that most normal people don't eat, right?
Yeah.
And you can only exercise so much, right? So obviously I gained a lot of weight, probably close to 50 pounds in about a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. So by the time I got to Hawaii, I was at my heaviest ever. But those people there, that's all they knew me as. Right? They didn't know me as this little gymnast. And I mean, I also grew 4 inches after I quit gymnastics. So when I was 17, I grew 4 inches. Yeah. Wow. Which was shocking to a lot of people, including myself. So, and then, you're in college and everyone's going out and partying and eating and let's go to breakfast and let's do this. And of course you want to partake. That's what you do. But all that time, I'm knowing that this isn't, I can't keep going this way. It's going to lead to disaster. So I really had to figure myself out. But, along with all of this too was, you think you're making good choices because this is what we learned, right? Fat is the devil. Don't eat fat. So, okay, I'm going to be really good and not eat fat. I'm going to go on this diet. I'm going to not eat this. When, years later, I learned that, that just set me up for needing cookies. Because if you don't eat fat, you're eating sugar. And once you eat sugar, you need to keep eating sugar because that's what the brain wants. And so it was the physiological, the re-education about how food affects you physiologically, along with just getting into my own crap about why I was turning to food, for whatever reason.
What was kind of like your social life like in college and things like that? I mean, were you kind of an outgoing person? Did you kind of stick to yourself? What did that look like?
Well, it's funny because I actually am an introvert, but I was very outgoing in college, I think, because I didn't really get to have a lot of that in high school or in my younger years. Yeah. I went to a very small school. Gymnastics was not my school sport. It was a private club. So while all my school friends were doing team sports at school, I wasn't part of that. I was doing something different over here. And while those teammates were great, we didn't live near each other. There was, we were in the gym together, and then competition, we were competing together. But I never really belonged anywhere. Right. And so I think college, I felt like, okay, I'm going to belong. I'm going to belong with this group and this group of people, and then I like these group of people here too. So I was very outgoing. I had very diverse groups that I would do things with. Yeah. And yet I still look back at that and I think, well, I still really didn't belong anywhere because I was trying to belong everywhere. So it was, I don't know if it was just my way of trying to figure out where I belong. Yeah. thinking that you can only belong in one place,
right,
which I don't believe at all. But again, kind of going through all this stuff and being so far away from home, your family's not there. Nobody I knew. I went to Hawaii not knowing a soul, right? And so we're all kind of in the same situation when we're there, and yet it truly was where I wanted to be. So it was interesting, just a lot of interesting dynamics, being where I really wanted to be, and yet still not really feeling like I fit in anywhere.
So when did you? I believe that's just the human journey for all of us, Michelle, is like finding our voice, finding our why, and finding our purpose and our reason, things like that. So kind of like when do you feel like you stepped into your voice or your purpose or your calling? Like at like what age, what season, what stage of life do you feel like you found Michelle?
I think there were stepping stones along the way. So one definitely big stepping stone was actually from high school and earlier years. There was one particular girl who, let's just say, she was very good at manipulating situations. And I'm not going to go into the whole story, but basically she had me convinced that nobody else in our circle liked me, and she was my only friend. And I wow, gosh, this is terrible. And again, me being kind of separated from people because of gymnastics, I believed what she said. Why would she lie to me? And there were other people in the group I was very close to, which clearly they were not talking to me anymore. Long story short, like a year after high school, a mutual friend told me, you really need to talk to this other person because I'm pretty sure whatever she's told you is 100% lies, all this stuff, right? So it was this interesting uncovering of a whole bunch of stuff that had been going on for years and years and years. And as a 47-year-old talking about this, it sounds completely ridiculous. And yet I have friends who have friends or daughters and kids who are this age, and I know this stuff still goes on. And so it was at that moment when I realized that I do have a voice, and I needed to have a voice with her, and I didn't need to only follow her like a little lost sheep. And when something doesn't make sense, let's uncover like the truth. Don't just believe it because this is what's being told. So that was one giant stepping stone, and another one actually came out of what I would say was my first very serious relationship. A guy that I met when I was in Hawaii. He was in the Army while I was in college. And first, serious love. We get engaged. I'm about to move to Boulder to go to grad school. He's supposed to get transferred to Fort Carson. We do the long distance thing for a year while that transfer is going through. And then the transfer doesn't go through. He ends up going to Fort Hood, Texas instead. So now it's another long distance thing. And so I pick up my life after I graduate from grad school. I move down to, I'll just be kind, a not super pleasant part of the country. Just Killeen, Texas. It's come a long way, but back then wasn't great. And I don't know, about 4 months before our wedding, I got a phone call from a girl telling me that she and David's child would be turning 1 next month, and she just thought I should know that before I married him. Yeah, that's what I said.
You probably said.
Yeah.
You probably
I was
said
like,
a few more
wow.
words, but
now, mind you, he and I were together during this whole time, so clearly there's a lot going on back in Hawaii while he was waiting for this transfer. So that was pretty pivotal. I had to figure out, wow, what do I do with this, right? I mean, here I am, 6, thinking I have my whole life figured out, my whole life ahead of me. This is our plan. It's going to be great. We've gone through a lot of struggles just from other things, but this is it, right? And now I have this dumped on me. I have a really big decision to make. So, long story short was, you lied to me, you cheated on me, you have a child that's not mine. This is not the standard that I have for myself. It's not the standard my parents have given us.
Right.
I mean, my parents, still 55 years later, loving, wonderful couple. And that's what they modeled for us. That's the standard they set and what I expected from my own life, right? And so it took about a week of me packing up my stuff and he and I talking through stuff. And I mean, in some ways it was the most amazing week we ever had together, and yet it was like the most devastating week at the same time. But I knew that once the phone call was made to my parents, that was it. That was it. So yeah, I made that call, and my dad flew to Dallas, and I drove to Dallas, and we drove 20 hours home. Didn't say a word about it. And ended up staying at home with my parents in Wisconsin for about 9 months while I figured out what I was going to do. And then decided to move back to Boulder because I had a lot of people who cared about me and loved me there, and I knew that I could try to start a new chapter of my life. So that was another big time I had a voice. This is going to be pretty crucial. Like, what do I want for my life? And no matter how sorry he is and how much we love each other and how whatever, it's too much to overcome.
So what did you, so you go back home for 9 months. Like, what was that 9 months like? Because obviously when you're in the kind of the heat of the battle, so to speak, or you're in the heat of a situation like you're in, like I'm assuming it's kind of like survival mode. You're just trying to gather your thoughts. You're trying to work through things, get your stuff, get out of there, and just kind of get back to safety, so to speak, right? So when you had that 9 months, which I'm sure that probably was actually good that you were kind of back home in a safe place and had kind of 9 months to work through some things. But during that 9 months, Michelle, like, what did you personally have to work through? Because you spend, you put that much effort, energy, time, all of that into another individual and you're 4 months away from getting married, like, and to have it end like that, that's gotta do some sort of damage, right? That would damage me like big time. So there has to be some stuff to work through, and obviously you did that because you've had a very impactful and powerful career up to this point. So during that 9 months, like, what did you really have to work through, and then what voice did you really gain, or what did you gain, from that time frame?
Yeah, I think what you have to work through is just your level of self-worth. And, again, this is way back. Email was just still kind of a new thing at this time.
Right.
So, and I think he was getting sent to somewhere, Bosnia or Seoul or somewhere out of the country. And so there was very limited communication, but we still were sort of communicating a little bit. What do we do? What are we going to do? Are we going to try to make it work? Just wrestling with that, and being at home with my parents who, we live out in the country, so it's a long drive to anything. But I needed to work. I still needed to have purpose, so I found a gym that would let me do personal training. It was a gut punch because it was like, we'll pay you $14 an hour, which, after I had already started my personal training career, I was making really nice money for back then for my age, and now it's like, oh man, this is dreadful. And it was winter in Wisconsin. It was a lot. So I had to work through really just deciding what did I want for my life, and how is I going to make that happen? Because I'm the only one that could make it happen. Right. I mean, Mom and Dad are wonderful, and I know they would have loved for me to probably live with them forever and ever. But Wisconsin was not the place for me. And if he and I were gonna get back together, there was a lot of work that he had to do on his end in a number of areas. Obviously, I had work to do as well on myself to maybe have more of a voice, because now, at that point, looking back, there were plenty of red flags that I ignored, right? Because, well, for all these reasons, we're together and we should be together, and he does this and we're like that and we have so much fun and all this in common. So you ignore all the red flags because this is the age, all my friends are getting married, this is what you're supposed to do, and now here I am, a giant failure, right? And I have no idea what I'm doing. So I really just had to suck it up and figure out that, well, the only person that's going to change your life is you. So how are you going to do that? And, really knowing that I loved what I was doing before I left. I mean, there was a lot of anger because I picked up a really great life in Boulder to go live with him in Texas and start this life together.
Yeah.
So I was pissed because I left a really nice life. And then I thought, well, you can go back to that nice life and you can rebuild that nice life if you want to. And so, it was a lot of just me deciding that I can sit here and cry about it and woe is me about it, or I can just get up and go and start my life again. And so, that's what I did. And I have to correct myself. I didn't live at home for 9 months. It was 4 months.
Oh, okay.
Which 4 months in winter in Wisconsin, trust me, it
felt like
9
right?
months. Yeah. So I moved back to Boulder in February of '99, I believe, and just reestablished at the gym I was working at. A lot of my clients came back to me. Of course, it was hard because they were all like, "Oh, you guys moved to Boulder." I was like, "Well, not exactly."
Not exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So even just being vulnerable and telling that story to people that knew me and loved me was hard. It was hard and scary. But when you do that, you recognize how many people really are there to support you.
Beautiful. Okay, so I wanna get into kind of just like your journey in terms of fitness, specifically like business, personal training, and all that. So let's talk about. Okay, so you move back to Boulder. You pick up personal training. What were some things when you were kind of just like a trainer before you kind of got into the corporate wellness and all that, which we're going to get into here in a minute. But what do you enjoy, or what did you enjoy about personal training, kind of working with people on an individual basis as opposed to maybe teaching classes or group training?
Yeah, so this was, again, before personal training was a thing. It was a relatively new concept for most people other than stars in Hollywood. But I was at the front desk of a small gym, and there was one trainer, and she was going to be having a baby. And she said, you should get certified and take my clients while I'm gone. You'll be great. And so I thought, why not? So I did it. And as soon as I started, I was like, oh, my gosh, this is everything. It's psychology, it's working with people, it's fitness, it's problem solving for people, because so much of that one-on-one time, it is therapy for some people. It's not just training the physical body, but it's talking through, you had a hard day at work, or you're having troubles with your teenager, or you and your significant other had an argument, right? It's navigating through all those things. And I realized that when I'm with people, it is so much more than here's a workout that you should do.
Of course.
And I think that's what I loved about it. It was helping not only their bodies, but their minds as well. And that's really how I came up with my business name, Better Beings, because I'm helping to create better human beings, better minds, better bodies, better beings. Like it just spoke to me in that way. And I think, just knowing that you have people that are coming to you voluntarily, and knowing that when they walk out of that door, they're feeling better physically. Well, maybe not in the moment physically, but they know they've done something good for themselves physically, but hopefully they're also feeling better emotionally and mentally as well.
Okay, so let's talk about Better Beings, because that's something that I mean, that's an awesome name, and the better minds, better bodies, better beings, kind of your slogan for Better Beings. Just let's talk about that a little bit more, because that, to me, that's really, you're taking like a holistic approach to training and lifestyle. And for me, I'm currently a personal trainer, and like when I talk to clients before we actually start working out, like I touch on like what I call the health foundation, which is sleep, nutrition, movement, and mindset. And I tell my clients, like, I approach this holistically. Like it's more than just coming to the gym and me putting you through a workout. There's a lot more that goes into it. So just talk about that holistic approach. Talk about better minds, better bodies, better beings. Just kind of like how you can really use physical training to improve somebody's mind, to improve somebody's body, to improve their overall well-being?
Yeah, I mean, as a person, I don't do a lot of personal training anymore. I still do a little bit of it, but and I think the holistic approach is much more of a practice these days than it used to be, right? It used to be, I'm hiring you to be my trainer. You're going to make me look like this. Yeah. Right. And so I think a lot of me, for the holistic approach, it came from my own journey, right? I was exercising. How come I'm not changing? Well, because my nutrition is still in the dumpster. That's why, right? Well, why is my nutrition in the dumpster? Well, it's because I have this internal dialogue that goes on about, you know, why I should eat or shouldn't eat, or what I should eat, or now I feel bad that I ate it. And it's just like a cycle, right? And so I decided that I'm my own best client. And I probably should start working with people the way I have to work with myself. And so, you know, if they're not seeing results, we have to talk about other things. I mean, I'm only with you an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a week. I don't know what you're doing the rest of your life, right? And so it was just through, you know, getting a comfort level with the people you're working with, and building that trust that they can talk to me about certain things, and we can work through these things together. Which was interesting when I was, you know, 26 versus when I'm 36, and now when I'm 47. Obviously, I have a lot more experience now than I did when I was 26. Course, and even though when I was in my 20s, I was training people in their 40s and 50s. And now that I'm 47, I'm training people in their 40s and 50s, right? Or even in their 20s, or in their 70s. And so I know I have learned as much from my clients as they have learned from me. I mean, no doubt about it. And I think just that open dialogue and communication and feeling comfortable to talk about certain things, even if you're in a gym and you're exercising, we can work hard physically and have some really interesting, evolving kinds of conversations at the same time.
Okay, so so health and happiness strategist. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that health and happiness go hand in hand. I know when I'm not healthy, I wasn't happy. I might have looked happy because I was smiling all the time and I was being the funny girl, but I wasn't happy. And I know when I'm not happy, you can't be healthy if you're not happy. And so the classes I teach on, you know, I think they can be very surface. Like somebody wants to learn about or come to me for weight loss. Okay. Well, weight loss isn't hard. You just burn more calories than you consume. That's how you do it. Not hard. Obviously, it's very hard, right? Because there's so much more that goes into that to make that all happen. So I think getting to the root of what is holding people back from making the choices that they know they need to make in order to get an outcome that they say they want. And so we can touch on, you know, the physical aspects, what you need to do as far as sleep and stress management and nutrition and exercise. But if you don't get to the root of why you're not doing what you need to be doing, none of that information matters. And, you know, I think there's a big happiness movement, right? Find your joy, find your happiness. I think happiness is something we all define differently. But I do believe that the two go together. And so if you are not happy, I want to look at, well, what are you doing with your habits? What are your health practices like? If you're not healthy, well, why are you making those choices? And how is that affecting you mentally and emotionally? And then it doesn't really matter which one we start with. We just have to start with something. And then it can snowball from there, right? Build on that. Okay,
you said we're kind of in this age of happiness, and especially I'd say, you know, out here we live in a very unique ecosystem in the Denver, Boulder areas, just Colorado in general, and there is this, you know, all this talk about happiness and stuff. Now I've got my perspective, but from your perspective, from your life experience, and just for you personally, Michelle, like what is happiness? Because from my perspective, happiness has to do with feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotions are up high, they're down low, they're all over the place. And so happiness is kind of like, to me, this is for me personally, happiness is like is fickle. Like it's a fickle word just because it again, it relies on feelings and emotions. Like people say, are you happy, Quinn? I'm like, I'm thankful, like I'm satisfied, I'm joyful. That's how I choose to word that. So for you personally, like what does happiness look like? And then when you're working with people, whether that's, you know, groups of people or maybe people one-on-one, like how do you help them discover or define happiness?
Yeah, I think for me personally, happiness and happiness is I'm doing the things that I know I need to do to be a thriving human. Mm-hmm. So I'm putting high quality fuel in my body. I'm moving my body. Mm-hmm. I'm surrounding myself with positive people, people who are growth minded and wanting to be open to understanding or, looking at things from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. It means that I am making a difference for someone or something. Mm-hmm. And that when I am quiet with myself, there's no judgment, there's no critic. Certainly there are things that I want to improve on, but that's coming from a positive place of growth, not, you're such a loser, you need to change, which was quite often what my internal dialogue sounded like. So I think happiness just for me is when I am by myself and quiet, there's no noise. There's literally no noise. It's just, I'm doing what I need to be doing. As far as helping people find their happiness, I don't know that happiness is something you find. I think it's something you create. Or you choose to find it or choose to see it. Right? Even, it doesn't mean that there's no struggle. Right. And I think that that's part of the interesting time in society right now. Right? There should be this instant result with no effort. Like that's the way, and that's what people expect in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And yet when you're just given something and you didn't work hard for it, you don't value it, you don't 100%. Appreciate it. Yep. And that's why I say pick your heart. It's going to be hard. Life is hard. Whoever told you it wasn't lied. They just did. So I think happiness is something that you have to decide you're willing to put the hard work in to discover what your definition of happiness is.
Very well put. Okay, so you just mentioned internal dialogue, and this is something that, like mindset and, the thoughts that we, kind of like entertain within our mind, the internal dialogue, the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we listen to other people tell about us, all of that type of stuff, all the mental, like for me, like that's literally where everything in terms of this human experience starts, right? If you want to call it happiness, if you want to call it joy, satisfaction, peace, all of that stuff, wherever we're going to find as human beings, like that place where we're just like, we're good with ourselves, I feel like, and I know that it all starts with that mindset, right? Like everything starts with mindset. So, like, again, you mentioned internal dialogue. Like, how have you, over the years, Michelle, had to work through maybe some of the internal dialogue and break through some of the negative internal dialogue that you were telling yourself, and kind of what does that look like practically?
Yeah, I mean, it does all start with that. It's the hardest thing to change, and yet until that changes, I think nothing else will.
100%.
And, a lot of my inner critic really did come from gymnastics. Yep. There were teammates who were better than me, who didn't try nearly as hard as I did. Right? I actually didn't have much talent. In fact, one of my coaches, there was tryouts for the team, and it was a husband and wife coaching team, and the husband, he's like, no, yep. She's not good enough, nope. And the wife was like, oh no, she's got heart, she's got grit, right? No, she'll be good because she wants it.
Right.
But all I heard was, no, she's not good enough. So that's what that 8-year-old heard, and then that continued to ring in my head, right? Especially when I worked really hard and I wasn't as good as somebody who didn't work as hard. Again, kind of putting this all in the context of competition, right? That's how we are judged. How did you do in competition? Doesn't matter that I did the routine perfectly in practice. Nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
They only care when you're in the spotlight and when you're going to get the gold medal for it. And so there was a constant narrative in my mind that I wasn't good enough. Never from my parents. My parents never pitted my sister and I against each other in any way. But my sister was the older, overachiever, perfectionist, valedictorian, number one in the class, right? Every teacher loved her. And at one point, we were in high school together, and I was math and science, not my strong suit. And
me neither.
Yeah,
not at all.
Yeah, and I was having a really hard time with calculus. Really, I just didn't get it. And I went in for some help from the teacher, and his exact words to me were, "Well, I don't understand. Your sister has no problem with this, so why don't you get it?"
Yeah.
And I was like, whew,
yeah.
Wow. And and so that's, again, just in me, like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not as good as anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And so then maybe that was sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy where I then, did turn to food to comfort myself, to feel better. Well, I'm not good enough anyway, so let me live that out, right? I'll go and gain 50 pounds and then, yep, you're right. I'm not like, you're right. Look at me, right?
Yeah.
And then going through the experience with my first fiance, it's like I wasn't good enough. He cheated on me, so clearly I wasn't good enough, right? So there's this constant thread of this. I wish I could, really hover over my life at that time and figure out where the big epiphany was. There was certainly another very pivotal moment that we haven't touched on here. It has to do with another relationship who I was married.
Yeah.
And the ultimate, you're not good enough. Basically, you are the best human ever. You're the best wife ever. You're the best this, that, everything that's ever happened to me, but I need to leave you.
Yeah.
Okay, here I am again, not good enough. Yet I'm good enough, but I'm not good enough because you have to leave. So
yeah.
I mean, how many more times? Like, how many more messages can I get that I'm not good enough? I honestly don't know what the big light bulb moment was for me where I decided I was good enough. But I think I just surrounded myself with all the right people along my way who were there in that really, really hard, dark time. I always took care of myself physically through all of it, so I know that put me leaps and bounds ahead of where maybe other people come out of something like that. But I think I had enough external voices telling me that I was good enough, that I decided to start listening. Right. And, I think it was also kind of at that time where having gone through enough life experience, because at this point now I'm 38 when I'm going through this, and I've already been through like the warm-up act with my fiance to realize that was child's play compared to this experience. That I kind of looked back to that first experience and thought, you know what, this is another pivotal moment. I get to decide what I'm going to do with my life. And being open about the challenges and the stories and the things that I experienced in that relationship. I was open about it with a few people, but I really wasn't 100% open about it until I wrote my book. So friends, family read that for the first time, and that was when they learned some stuff.
Was that right when you put that into the book? Was that like a release for you, and was that a healing process for you?
A little bit, although I had already started talking about these things in the classes that I teach and when I do one-on-one coaching. So it's not that I hadn't told the story. I just hadn't told the story to people who were very close to me. Kind of in a way to protect them, because they were going to worry about me and be hurt for me, maybe be upset with me that I hadn't shared it with them when I was going through it. So the story, when I wrote the book, the story was not new to me anymore. I had already gone through my healing process and did a lot of hard work before I finally wrote it. But I had been talking about it and telling the story for quite some time. But as you know, you put something out in paper or a recorded voice, it's now out there forever for everybody to hear, including this person. And so, I think being authentic is just, you just have to do it because nothing else matters. And maybe when I decided to really open up and be authentic and decide that I'm worth it was having been teaching enough and seeing hundreds and hundreds of people who go through all these struggles. I actually had the first time I told my Dairy Queen story was on a one-on-one call with a gal that I was doing a class with. She was really struggling. I said, look, I'm going to tell you a story. And when I told it to her, she was dumbfounded. She's like, I look at you standing up there, and you're like the epitome of health and wellness and everything. There's never in a million years did I imagine that you would go, you did that. And I said, I know. And she said, will you, the next time we have class, will you tell that story to the class? I was like, yeah, sure. I think that might be the very first time that I actually told an entire group of people my true experiences, right? And then once you kind of let that cat out of the bag, it's like, just spill it all. Who cares at this point, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So being open about stuff like that and receiving the feedback from people about how much that helped them and how valuable that was and insightful that was, I think is also something that just strengthens that internal dialogue, right? That, no, you're normal. Everybody goes through this. It might be packaged a little differently, but everybody's got a story. Some are more dramatic, traumatic than others, but it doesn't diminish anybody's story. Everybody's got a story. And we all just need to figure out how to work with it and do what you want to do with it.
Yeah, that's good. That's what this podcast is all about, is people sharing their story, right? So that others can be positively impacted. Now, before we move on, just the inner critic and all of that, is that still is that a daily battle and struggle for you? Do you have to really just focus on your mindset as you're walking through each day in terms of that inner critic and kind of that self-worth, or is that something that you've completely just broken through and it's in the rear view mirror?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely in the rearview mirror. Cool. It's not something I even hear anymore. Every now and then, maybe, but after going through some hard stuff, you just decide that a voice in your head is the stupidest waste of time, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially when you know that you are doing the best you can with what you've got. You are putting whatever you can into the universe that's helping people, helping create a positive environment for someone or something. Looking back at my experience with my ex-husband, I know that I lived authentically and I loved authentically. And while you can look back and people are like, oh, do you regret it? Was it a mistake? I know the first situation, there were red flags everywhere.
Right.
Yes, that was a mistake. The second situation, I don't think it was a mistake. I think there were a lot of things that happened, and unfortunately, because of stuff he went through and is going through and will probably continue to go through, that affected our dynamic.
Right.
Our stuff had nothing to do with us. It had everything to do with him. And again, I was really pissed because I didn't get him. I didn't need to learn this lesson. I didn't need to learn any more lessons. I already learned a lesson, right? Of course, then having gone through my healing process, I learned lots and lots of lessons from this one. So it's then, what do I decide to do with those lessons? And certainly one of the lessons was you need to just quiet the noise of the inner critic. There's no point. It's not helpful. It's not necessary. Move on. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, I want to touch on a little bit just business and entrepreneurship, right? So kind of what are some takeaways or what are some lessons that you've learned through having better beings, having your own business, being an entrepreneur, kind of going out there and just taking control of your life and doing what you want to do to create that happiness for yourself and others? What are some lessons? What are some things that you've gained over the years through
business and entrepreneurship?
It's so interesting because it's only been recently that I even think of myself as an entrepreneur. Again, this is, way back when I told my parents what I was going to do. I was going to be a personal trainer. My mom actually said, well, honey, if after a few months you have to get a real job, that's okay. And that, it's still the joke, right?
Yeah, of course.
I didn't see myself, I don't even know if that was even a word back then. I'm sure it was, but I was just self-employed. That's what I did. I was a personal trainer. But I think it's hard. You are solely responsible for everything. So I think sometimes, it gets glamorized a little bit.
More than a little bit, especially.
Right?
I know you're not the social media girl, but you get on Instagram and social media, like entrepreneurship is like the new thing, and it's hot and it's sexy, and that's not the reality though.
No, and I never had to make that scary decision of leaving a consistent paycheck to jump into an entrepreneur. It's the only thing I know, so I don't know any different. But I went through really hard economic times. The economic crash of 2009 was devastating. I was down to 4 clients a week, 4 hours a week. That was my income, 4 hours of personal training clients a week.
You can't survive on that.
No. So you learn to be resourceful. So that's actually sort of along the time when corporate wellness was taking hold. So I got looped in with some companies that did the on-site biometric screenings and worked for crap pay, but crap pay was better than no pay, right? You do what you got to do. So I did that, and I often did the health coaching at the end where I talk about people with their results and things like that. And just out of that, kind of organically came, the whole kind of wellness trainings. So my own curiosity, learning about my own self and the things that help me break through my food issues, and learning more about nutrition and how the body works and sleep and why I'm not sleeping. And, I'd say I've just learned along the way about different things that have worked for me, and translated that into then course content that I help others with the same stuff. I think always thinking about what's next, right? As soon as you get comfortable, and I definitely found myself in that place. I was very comfortable with my great clients paying me really nice money. It was a wonderful schedule. And then the bottom dropped out because the economy crashed and people lost jobs and moved and certainly aren't going to pay a trainer, right?
Right.
So that was a huge lesson, is do not ever get comfortable, because the minute you get comfortable with where you are and what you're doing in business, that is death. That's a dangerous place to be, unless you are so financially set that it's not going to matter.
Right.
Well, I'm not. So,
me neither.
So
Me
it
neither.
matters.
Yeah.
So I've learned to continue to evolve and think about what more can I offer? How can I do it in a different way? It is a little bit interesting being my age and having done this for as long as I've done it, and now having the next crop of youngsters coming up in the health and wellness industry, and thinking, how am I going to keep up with them, right? They all have these amazing social media feeds and these amazing YouTube videos and all these podcasts and other online courses, and I'm like, and I just wrote a book. That's so boring, and that's so old school, oh my God, grow up, Michelle, right? So I know that I have to step outside and do things that are not comfortable, get my online courses launched, which are totally ready to go. I've been teaching this stuff for 10 years. It's not like I have to make anything up. I just have to record it and put it online. It's really simple. And yet there's a big roadblock for me in my brain about it, and I don't know why. So.
Well, I mean, that was something, but since we're there right now, I was going to bring up to you at some point after we're done with our podcast, is just I'd love to help you out at least a little bit, just on Instagram and your social media, because I go to your Instagram, obviously you have all the content, you have all the experience. Again, it's just we have to get it out there, because they say content is king, and you have the content, you have the experience, you have everything. You just need, it's just got to be out there on the platforms, right? So
I know.
I'd love to help you a little bit, because I always say Instagram is my jam, and especially with health and fitness, there's so many opportunities that people lose out on when they don't have that social media presence. especially Instagram, especially within health and fitness, right?
So. You're absolutely right, and I've known this for years.
Yeah, right.
But I think maybe that is where maybe a little that fear comes in, or the inner critic of, well, why would anyone listen to me?
Right,
I mean, look at all these other really great people who are already doing it. You don't, like, to Natalie's, not another wellness podcast. Well, not another like wellness online course. Who cares? There's a million of them. And yet I know that I have unique perspective. I know that I have incredible information that can help a lot of people. This is a conversation I've had hundreds of times. So I'm going to take you up on that offer.
I'd love to help you. I mean, because I really enjoy social media, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But so we've been going for an hour and 14 minutes, so we'll kind of start wrapping things up, Michelle. Now, I do want to touch on more specifically kind of corporate wellness, because that's something that I'm personally like interested in. It piques my interest just because you can really get into larger groups of people and kind of share your message, and the goal would be to positively impact more people. So kind of like, what has been your experience with corporate wellness? Kind of like, what do you do now? So if somebody gets a hold of you, or you reach out to someone, they say, yeah, Michelle, I'd like to have you come to my company, business, startup, or whatever. What does that kind of look like? What is the nuts and bolts of you going into a business or a corporation? Like, kind of what are you sharing with them?
Yeah, so I have probably my training catalog has maybe 75 different topics and trainings on every health and wellness related topic, things that I've created over the course of time. So it might be a lunch and learn. It might be, just part of their wellness program. They can attend a wellness class and get their points. So a lot of them, will have some kind of incentive-based program. So I might just go in once a month and speak to the clients, the company, whoever wants to come, on whatever topic they happen to choose. I do 5-week series where I'm with them 5 weeks, once a week for 5 weeks. There's often one-on-one coaching that goes along with that for the participants. My 10-week U Revolution is another one that, is really my favorite 10 weeks of the year, when I get to do it for Denver Public School employees, because it's the time where I know I can really make a big impact on people, versus the one-off and then you go away and you don't really, do anything that you just learned. But it can look a lot of different ways. That's the benefit of working with boutique wellness, is I will do whatever the client needs me to do, or whatever they think is helpful for their particular population. I've done half-day workshops. I did the U Revolution as a 2-day workshop for a group. So that's really all it involves is, I think employers are recognizing that healthy humans make better employees, and so trying to support their employees to be healthy, and to have the opportunity to have it right there at the work site, where it's somebody who's not related to the company or related to their insurance. And those are the two big things. A lot of places have like the opportunity for health coaching, but it's telephonic health coaching and it's through their insurance plan. And people don't they generally don't want that.
Of course.
So to have just an outside third party come in that, they trust because they've heard me speak, or they, have gotten another referral from somebody, is usually they tend to really ingest and absorb the information I'm giving.
Now, a lot of my clients that I have in Littleton in terms of personal training, most of them are seniors, so they're retired, but some of them are still working and things like that. But a lot of people that I see, if they are still working, they're in that corporate cubicle setting, and they're sitting like all day. So one of my big focuses with my clients is just simple like static stretching, just to simply loosen things up, especially like the posterior chain, right? Because when you sit, your glutes are deactivated, hamstrings are deactivated, low back, all this different stuff, right? So it's like usually it's just one stretch at the end of the workout, and it's a hamstring stretch. Just because the hamstrings tie into the glutes are going to tie into that low back. If we can just stretch out the hamstrings, it's going to at least loosen things up. So practically, for some of the listeners that are maybe stuck in a cubicle, they're sitting down 6, 7, 8 hours a day, which, oh man, that's tough. But I hope you're making some decent money, because I couldn't do that. But anyways, what are some practical things for people that are stuck in the cubicle, that are stuck sitting most of the day? What are some practical things that they can do, maybe to get the blood flowing, to kind of, just make themselves a little bit healthier in that corporate setting?
Yeah, I'd say 5 minutes every hour.
Okay.
Everybody can take 5 minutes an hour. Nobody's job is that important unless you're in the middle of, open heart surgery, saving someone's life. You can take 5 minutes every hour to get up. And so, and this was back when I did do a lot of personal training. I had clients who were exactly as you described. So we would just write a whole bunch of different things down on Post-it notes, and they would put them in a fish bowl, and every hour they would draw something out of the bowl and do it for 5 minutes.
Cool. Yeah.
So, and you can do it a bunch of different ways, and obviously your particular work setting is going to determine what you're comfortable doing or not. But get up and go for a 5-minute walk around your building. Go up and down the stairs for 5 minutes. Go somewhere and, get some resistance bands and do some resistance band exercises. Do some wall squats or jumping jacks. I mean, you can always do something. That is definitely a message I tell people, especially when it comes to fitness and movement. They're like, oh, I don't have time. Well, 5 minutes is better than 0 minutes. Absolutely. So, it's kind of the mindset about I can't do what I want to do, so I do nothing. Well, sometimes it's just busting out of your own box of what you think a workout is supposed to look like, because it doesn't matter what you're supposed to do. All that matters is what you will do and what you can do. Yeah. So again, kind of focusing on the positive, not what you can't do, but let's talk about what you can do, and work from there. So, you commit to 5 minutes an hour or whatever it is, and then get pretty deliberate about what you're going to do in that time.
Busting out of your box. That's a good one. I like that. That's I can picture that. All right. So before we wrap things up here, just I want to touch a little bit on nutrition. So we kind of talked about your blizzard incident, gaining a bunch of weight. How has your personal nutrition evolved or developed over the years? And then how do you kind of approach nutrition when it comes to individuals or groups of people? Because nutrition is very it should be very individualized, but we can give general guidelines, tips, principles, things like that. So personal nutrition for you, what does it look like? How has it changed? And then kind of what are some of your general practices for general population?
Yeah, my personal nutrition was twofold. First, again, it was relearning what actually the body needs. So fat is not the devil.
Amen.
I actually have a mantra that is so close to being trademarked. It's PFF is your BFF. So protein, fat, fiber is your best friend forever. Every
That's
time,
good.
Yeah, I know, right?
We got to get that stuff up on your Instagram.
I know, good. Right? Yes, the PFF is your BFF handbook will be out later this year.
Good.
But basically, every time you eat, there should be protein, fat, and fiber. Because what I know is that steady blood sugar is the key to life, and it's definitely the key to avoiding sugar binges later on. So when I was in the mindset of, okay, I'm going to make better choices, I'm going to be good, I'm going to, not eat cookies, I would have fat-free yogurt, a banana, and a plain bagel, which back in the 90s, that was healthy.
Yeah, of course.
And then all I wanted was cookies, right? Because learning later, all I just ate was sugar, sugar, and more sugar. Well, of course I want cookies because I spiked my blood sugar, which means it crashed. So protein, fat, and fiber always, every single time you eat. Like every time you should be able to say, here's my protein, here's my fat, here's my fiber. When you take care of the physiological need the way your body wants to be taken care of, it makes the psychological needs a lot easier to address. But if you set yourself up for spikes and crashes in blood sugar, you are going to eat sugar. There's almost no way around it.
Right.
So that was like magical, which it truly is your BFF. I'm not joking. I've taught hundreds of people this, and they're all like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what a difference it makes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what you can do is eat healthy foods, but if it's not the right combination, it's not the way your body wants to be fueled, it's still not going to serve you well. So that was a big one. And the other big mindset shift for me was to stop labeling food, right? I grew up with good foods and bad foods. Right? Why do you think I went to Dairy Queen? Because, no offense to my mom at all, I love you, Mom, and you know this, but she would pick me up from gymnastics, and sometimes she would say in a whisper, do you want to go get a sin? Right. We're the only two in the car. And
Is that a blizzard?
Of course it's a blizzard. And in fact, it's a peanut butter crunch blizzard with extra peanut butter.
So
yes.
good.
Right.
So
right.
good.
So it's sinful, right? That's why I rebelled with it.
Yep,
Look what I can do. So it was a big mindset shift in my head that there are not good foods and bad foods. There are foods that nourish me physically, make my pants feel good, give me energy, prevent disease. There are foods that just give me pure joy and pleasure, and I like the way they taste. But I know I can't just eat the ones I like and still have an outcome that I like.
Right, of course.
So I focus on healthy foods that I like because I like them. And sometimes I have the other stuff too, and I don't feel bad about it, right? It's not about all or nothing. It's every choice is either going to help me get closer to a goal or farther away from a goal. So what is that choice, right? So another little mindful acronym I have is WAIT, WAITE, why am I tempted to eat? And sit with that and really answer that question. And if it's anything other than physical nourishment, then I probably have to have some follow-up questions like, is it worth it? And sometimes it's worth it. And then you eat it, you love it, you don't feel bad about it, but you know it can't always be worth it and still have an outcome that you're going to like. And so when I'm working with clients, it's a lot of the same stuff, right? Nutrition is very personal. Absolutely.
Yep.
But I'm always going to focus on foods that you like. I don't do meal plans for people.
Yeah.
Because a meal plan doesn't matter if you're on a cruise or your in-laws are in town or you're late from school, coming home from work. So we start out by just making the list of healthy foods you like, and then I have them start to practice. Show me your PFF combos, because that's key. And they have to be able to come up with enough PFF combos to nourish themselves regularly throughout the day, every 2 to 4 hours, most of your calories early and often, fewer calories as we get closer to bedtime. That in itself is a huge lifestyle adjustment for a lot of people, right? Because we get into this hardly eat anything all day, and then I go home and I can't stop eating, and I have no willpower. I'm like, it's not about willpower. You just didn't eat, right? So I'm always going to start by focusing on the foods that they like. And then we got to figure out, what is your lifestyle? How is this going to play with the other people in your household that you also have to feed, right? There's a lot that's going to go into it. What's your relationship with food? What's your attitude about food? For a long time, I feared food. I was afraid to be around it because I was going to eat it if I was around it, right? So
I've struggled with that.
Yeah, there's so many layers, and everybody's story is different. So it's really digging into their story to determine how we're going to move forward.
For sure. Cool. All right, so before I ask you the last question, Michelle, is there a message, is there anything that's kind of on your heart that you would like to leave with the listeners and myself?
I think a big message for me is just you do the best you can with what you've got in any moment, whatever that is. I think this idea of being perfect, and I hear it all the time from people. They'll say, well, this is really silly, but, and then they'll go on to tell me this amazing thing that they did that was really hard for them to do. I'm like, well, why did you preface it with this is silly? Well, because most people do this anyway. But there is no this is but, right? This is a victory. Let's just own it and be proud of it. It doesn't matter if it's not someone else's struggle, it's your struggle. And you overcame it. That's awesome. You should celebrate that.
Absolutely.
It is going to be hard. Healthy choices are hard choices. That's just the reality of it. So embrace the hard. Don't be mad about it. Just embrace it and recognize that change takes time. It takes effort. It takes dedication. But as long as you keep doing what you know you need to do to get where you want to go, that is called progress. That to me is success.
Absolutely.
Let go of this idea that I must see an outcome or it's not success, right? And I think it's one of my taglines, it's be a better being. So I'm always trying to be a better being, whether that's pushing myself with nutrition or exercise or, doing something that I would normally say no to, putting myself out there on Instagram, right? Be a better being and do stuff that is uncomfortable because that is how you grow. And
absolutely, 100%.
I think a human is always wanting to grow.
Cool. All right, so the last question I have for you, Michelle, what sets your soul on fire?
I'm really happy to say I'm in a place where what I do sets my soul on fire. Just to know that I'm making a positive impact in people's lives. And it's interesting because it took me a while to acknowledge that for a long time that sounded very self-serving, and I don't like to be that way.
Right.
But having had enough people tell me that I've made an impact in their lives, I decided just to be okay saying it out loud and owning it. So, it really is. It's amazing to be in that place where I can support myself doing something that's really cool.
Yeah. And that's and you've literally climbed from the bottom of the mountain and you're kind of to the top, so to speak, and that's something that I hope you do embrace and appreciate about yourself, because like you've put in the work, right? You've fallen down, you've picked yourself back up, and you're doing an amazing job and positively impacting a lot of people. So I hope that you embrace that, because that's kind of like, even in my own life, it's like the mountain is so high and I'm at the bottom. I had my teaching job, I quit, and then you're climbing the mountain, now you're back down, you're staring up. It's like, dude, and for me, it's like the season I've been in since I quit teaching back in the fall. It's like, I just want this season to be over because it sucks so bad, but there's so many lessons if I stay open. There's so many lessons for you. There's so many lessons for us human beings to learn in whatever season we're going through, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. If we just remain open to learn, we can learn so much, and that's going to make us better. And in turn, if we want to positively impact other people's lives, that's going to help us, just positively impact more people's lives. So I just want to, acknowledge you, Michelle, and, just for what you are doing in the sense of positively impacting people's lives, especially through health and fitness, because that's something I'm very passionate about. And I believe that there are so many lessons for us human beings to learn through physical training, through health, wellness, and fitness. So I just want to acknowledge you for that, for what you're doing. And I just want to thank you for your authenticity and for sharing your story today. And before I kind of do the outro here, if people have resonated with your story, if somebody's like, wow, like I'm going through this right now, and Michelle's already been through it, if they want to find out more about what you've got going on in regards to corporate wellness and all the different programs and experience that you have to offer to people, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, well, certainly not much on social media, but
you're there.
I'm there. But my website, betterbeings.net, has direct links to everything. I do want to mention I am hosting a retreat to Bali, the Be a Better Being in Bali retreat.
Cool.
So if this did resonate with anybody and you want to immerse yourself in it, that would be an amazing experience. It's at the end of May through June.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say just through my website. I'm on LinkedIn, so always happy to connect with anybody. So please, Better Beings US on Facebook and Instagram, and then just my name on LinkedIn.
Cool.
As well.
Awesome. So thank you so much for just the opportunity to connect today, Michelle, and thank you once again for sharing your story.
Yeah, well, thank you, Quentin. And I want to commend you and all the people who put their voices out there, because it's not easy.
Right.
And I do know that it is positively impacting so many people. And, I started listening to you because I heard you interview somebody else. And I think that's just how the thread continues. And the more positive stuff we can put in our minds instead of filling it with a lot of negativity that's out there, I think the better that we can all
100%.
be. So
Cool.
Thank you for what you do.
You're very welcome, Michelle. All right, so 127 Fit podcast listeners, once again, I just want to thank you for your listening ears. I'm always thankful that you hang out with myself and the guests that I'm bringing onto the podcast. Thank you for hanging out with Michelle and myself today. If you'd like to find out more about the guests that I'm bringing onto the podcast, or if you'd like to find out more about myself personally, you can find that information on Instagram at 127fit. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. LinkedIn is at Quentin Vars. If you guys would do me a huge favor and please leave a 5-star rating and review, and also subscribe to the podcast, that would be cool. I cannot stress it enough. I say this towards the end of all my podcasts. I ask you guys to leave that 5-star rating review. If you haven't done it yet and you're finding value, which I know you are, in a specific episode or episodes of the podcast, please, especially if you're listening in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app, just go and leave that written review. That helps in the algorithm. More people find the podcast. If more people are finding the podcast, more people are going to listen, and more people are going to be positively impacted. So just that's the greatest support you can show a podcaster, a specific podcast, is to leave a written review wherever you're listening. I ahead of time thank you for that. If you think you would be a great guest, or if you have a friend or an acquaintance you think would be a great guest or guest for the 127 Fit podcast, please send me an email or give this email out, 127fit@gmail.com. And as you guys are finding great value in a specific episode or episodes of the 127 Fit podcast, another huge favor I'd ask is that you guys would take that specific episode and episodes and share it on your Facebook and Instagram stories using the hashtag #BeSomeoneToFollow. And then per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time until next time, I will catch you guys later.